Hello out there, everybody. Manny here at Area 503. And I hope you all have been well since our last video. Today I just want to talk with you all a little bit about my favorite continent, Antarctica. Let's just start with a brief history of the continent. Rumors of Antarctica date back all the way to the 1st century AD. However, it wasn't up until the year 1773 that a British captain by the name of James Cook came within about 75 miles or 120 kilometers of the continent. It wouldn't be until 1820 when an Imperial Russian naval ship, an American sailing ship, and a British naval ship would all claim to have spotted Antarctica in the same year. Now, it's no surprise that directly after that, the first Russian Antarctic expedition was sent down to Antarctica in January of 1820. They had 2 ships, and their mission was to map and catalog the continent over a 2-year expedition, which they succeeded in. Years later, in 1839, an American expedition led by Charles Wilkes discovered a part of the continent which is now known as Wilkes Land. A year later, in 1840, a French explorer by the name of Jules Dumont d'Urville landed on the coast of Adélie Land and claimed it for the French. A year after that, in 1841, a British explorer named Commander James Clark Ross passed through the Ross Sea and discovered Ross Island, both of which are now named after him. And then in 1853, Mercator Cooper made the first formal American landing in East Antarctica. It should be noted that none of these expeditions made it to the South Pole, nor to my knowledge even attempted to make it to the South Pole. Most of them actually were just to establish outposts and scientific or most likely whaling and resource collection stations. And it seems that Antarctica mostly lost the public interest at this point because it wasn't until 1901 when another expedition would go back and attempt to try to reach the South Pole. In 1901, Ernest Shackleton and Robert Falcon Scott would be teammates on the Discovery expedition to explore Antarctica. That expedition would ultimately fail, being plagued by scurvy and resulting in the ship being icebound for the winter. And so after 2 years in Antarctica, they would dislodge their ship and return home. But both Shackleton and Scott would be back, this time not as teammates. Shackleton would make it back first in February of 1908. He mounted a second expedition, and they were successfully able to climb Mount Erebus. Bolstered by this achievement, in October of 1908, Shackleton and his crew set out to reach the South Pole. After a 4-month hike in the dry, frigid snow, they would ultimately turn around, getting as close as 97.5 miles from the actual South Pole, the closest anyone has ever been. Upon returning from the expedition, Shackleton was quick to make his discoveries and his achievement known to everybody. After hearing about his former colleague Shackleton's near success, Robert Scott had renewed interest in forming his own expedition and getting to the pole. So in June of 1910, he set out. Shortly after setting sail, Scott received a cable from a colleague named Roald Amundsen. Amundsen told him that he was starting an expedition of his own to the South Pole, and so the race was on. Both parties would ultimately reach the South Pole, but that doesn't mean that this story has a happy ending. Amundsen's party was the first to arrive on December 14th, 1911. And then Scott's party shortly thereafter on January 17, 1912. Amundsen's party, being the first to arrive at the pole, returned home without incident to earn a spot in history. Scott's party, however, was not so fortunate. On the return journey from the pole, the entire team perished. However, they also earned a place in history, as the South Pole Station is now known as Amundsen Scott Station. But isn't the story of Amundsen and Scott a great lesson to us all? I mean, if the two parties would have worked together in a spirit of cooperation instead of competition, they could have shared in the honor and most likely survived the expedition. Ultimately, the honor was shared anyways, so that the competitive process only served to cause a brave explorer to lose his life. And that really is a shame. Anyhow, it would be almost 30 years later when explorers would return to Antarctica. And in my opinion, this is where things really begin to get interesting. In 1938, the Third Germanic Antarctic Expedition was dispatched presumably to establish a whaling base to secure a supply of whale fat, which was in widespread use at the time. This expedition would spark debate for years to come, as it is widely believed that this expedition also had a clandestine mission to establish a German military presence on the continent of Antarctica. I have yet to see any evidence to suggest that there was a secret Nazi base built in Antarctica, but that hasn't stopped the internet from speculating wildly on the subject. One theory claims that Hitler actually faked his own death and escaped on a U-boat to the secret Antarctic base. Another theory suggests that the Nazis built a base in Antarctica, and that in 1943 to 1945, the British fought them in a top-secret project known as Tabarin. And yet another theory suggests that the Americans were the ones who fought them in a secret project known as Operation High Jump. Now I just gotta tell you, I have no idea what actually went on down there. What I do know is that when the Germanic expedition landed, they did claim a chunk of land for Germany, and they called it New Swabia, after one of the boats in the expedition named New Schwabenland. As far as I understand it, that claim would later be nullified when the Antarctic Treaty would be signed. We will talk more about the treaty later.
This is a tale of men and of their willingness to endure hardship and risk life above and beyond the call of duty in the service of country and humanity.
Let's talk more about Operation High Jump for a minute.
As Secretary of the Navy, James V. Forrestal explains the reasons for the enterprise.
There is only one untouched reservoir of raw materials left in the world, and that's in the region known as Antarctica, an area larger than the combined area of the United States and Europe. The American government is sending a naval expedition to that region. The purpose is to train our Navy in polar operations so that it may better perform its function of preserving the peace upon the seven seas of the world. Beyond that, the American government is seeking to do its share in the discovery and the release to the world of the unknown treasures of Antarctica in the interests of all mankind.
In 1946, the United States Navy sent Admiral Richard E. Byrd to Antarctica.
Sums up to this, gentlemen. The Secretary has approved our plans, confirming you, Admiral Byrd, as the officer in charge of the expedition, and you, Admiral Cruzen, as the task force commander. And we get what we need. That makes Operation High Jump the greatest polar expedition in history.
He led 13 ships and close to 5,000 men to the southern continent. Operation High Jump has just as much speculation and mystery surrounding it as the Third Germanic Expedition. High Jump was officially a training mission to determine the abilities of the soldiers in frigid conditions. But I wouldn't at all be surprised to learn that High Jump had another mission or missions. Just the year before, the United States had dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Operation Paperclip was underway, secretly seizing Nazi scientists and relocating them to the United States. So like I said, I wouldn't at all be shocked if they sent a secret force to Antarctica. If you're interested, the official report on Operation High Jump is over 500 pages long, and I will link to it below so that you can go and browse through it yourself. And I've also found a 1948 documentary titled The Secret Land, which was a documentary based on Operation High Jump as well. It's a great watch. It's about an hour and a half long, but it's worth your time if you're interested in the subject. There will be a link to this video in the description as well. Anyhow, just like the New Swabia expedition, Operation High Jump has been subject to much speculation. One theory suggests that Admiral Byrd and his fleet engaged aliens and were attacked by them, ultimately having to flee Antarctica. Another theory suggests that Admiral Byrd located the secret Nazi base that we spoke about earlier and destroyed it. And I've spent a number of hours going through the high jump materials, and I've seen nothing that suggests anything out of the ordinary. But suffice it to say that Antarctica has quite an exciting and mysterious history. And that just covers the past exploration of the continent. The current status of Antarctica is a bit more complicated, but I will do my best to try to explain it. In 1951, there were 9 countries that had a significant interest in Antarctica. 2 of these countries had actually not seized any land for themselves. This was the United States and the Soviet Union. And so while they actually did not possess any land at the time, they reserved the right to claim land in the future. 7 other countries had actually seized land on Antarctica and claimed it as their own. Norway, Australia, France, and New Zealand had all claimed sections of land. Chile, Argentina, and the United Kingdom had also claimed land, except their claims all overlapped each other and were in question. So these original 9 countries, along with 3 others that also had scientific interests in Antarctica, Belgium, Japan, and South Africa, all sat down and signed the Antarctic Treaty System in 1951. Since then, a total of 52 parties have signed the treaty. The treaty outlines how Antarctica can and cannot be used. For example, Article 1 states, Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. No military activity is permitted except for scientific research or other peaceful purposes. Article 3 talks about the open sharing of scientific knowledge from information and research done on Antarctica. Article 5 bans the explosion of nuclear weapons and the storage of nuclear waste on the continent. Article 7 outlines how signatory countries can designate observers for the continent and guarantees each signee a right to aerial observation. The treaty establishes Antarctica as a sort of condominium that is communally owned and maintained by the signees of the treaty. But Article 4 of the treaty also states that the treaty shall not overwrite any existing claim to Antarctica. That means those original 9 countries still could have a claim to some land there, if the current geopolitical situation changes. But these lines on the map of supposed owned land, in function, mean very little. Countries that have signed the treaty that do not have land are allowed to build outposts and other scientific stations on land owned by the countries that do. And from what I understand in the scientific community, there's a very cooperative spirit down in Antarctica. And I kind of feel like it should be a model for the rest of the world about how to work together cooperatively instead of competitively.
And now I'm going to get even.
One more final interesting fact about Antarctica. The only branch of law enforcement that has any jurisdiction down there is the United States Marshal Service. So who knows, maybe we will see a reboot of U.S. Marshals with Tommy Lee Jones reprising his role as Sam Gerard, Antarctica Marshal. I plan on doing several more videos about Antarctica in the future, about several of the more interesting topics. So stay tuned for those. But for now, that's all I've got on Antarctica, my favorite continent. As always, this has been Manny at Area 503. And I wish you all the best until we meet again. And I am out of here to continue my search for universal truth.